Hello, how you doing? Welcome back to my library. Today we're going over all of the books that I read in June, which was a very busy month for me and therefore less books than usual, but that is just fine because I had so much fun in June. I basically just took like 2 mini vacations. I took a 3-day trip to Halifax with my friend for their birthday, and then the next week took a 3-day trip to Toronto for a couple of concerts and pride events and that kind of thing. So lots of moving around, lots of fun stuff to be had. It was fantastic. Very tired though, but that's all right. It was totally worth it. But yeah, as a result of all the wonderfully fun things that I did last month, I did not read nearly as much as usual. So I'll get right into the stats here. So in June, I finished a total of 14 books. I DNF'd 5 books, which gave me a grand total of 4,032 pages and 46 hours of audiobooks. My number of books read was similar to usual months, but they were mostly quite short books, so my page count is pretty low. I read 0 books just physically as per usual, 9 books solely through audiobook, 2 ebooks, and 3 books that were a combination of the audiobook with either the physical or ebook. So with that said, let's get into the DNFs. The first one that I DNF'd was Frontier by Grace Curtis. I read a book by this author the month previous and I enjoyed it but didn't love it, but I wanted to try a different book by them to see if maybe it was just that book that I didn't like, and unfortunately I think it is their writing. I'm just not huge on it. I don't think I got super far into this one, maybe about 50 pages if I can recall correctly. And while I was really enjoying the setting and the concept of this one, I did not like the writing and didn't care for the characters whatsoever. And then I also DNF'd the Broposal, which I'm sad about because I love the idea of this book. I love all of the different kinds of representation that were in here. I can totally see why others would like this book. The romance tropes that were already present at the beginning of the book were my least favorite, so I just knew that I wasn't going to really love this book, so I figured I would call it quits fairly early on. I think maybe about 20% of the way through. I also DNF'd The Coming Storm, which had been on my TBR since 2021. This one is set in, I think, Prince Edward Island, which is not Nova Scotia, but it's at least the East Coast, so I was planning on reading it while I was in Nova Scotia, and I think I got maybe like 25 pages in and I was immediately not having a good time with that one. Probably nothing wrong with it, it's just not personally my thing. I found the main character to be a little bit irritating for my personal preferences. I DNF'd Always Human by Ari North, which is a sapphic sci-fi graphic novel. This one was a very quick DNF. I didn't get very far into it. I got to the part where the two of them met for the first time and the one character asked the other if she wants to go on a date and she says, "No, I'm good, I'm not interested." And then the other character is like, "Let me convince you to say yes." And I was like, nope, I'm actually done now. So very quick DNF for that one. And then finally, the last DNF was The Undetectables by Courtney Smyth. This one was a buddy read with my friend, and actually both of us ended up DNFing it. I think the writing style for this one was really funky. We both thought that it was a historical novel because of like the names and the language, the slang that was used, the setting felt very historical. It did not feel at all like modern times. And then all of a sudden they're like pulling out cell phones and stuff and we're like, what the fuck? It was so jarring. And then I think there was also some issues with the tense that was used. Sometimes it was present, sometimes it was past tense. It just really needed an extra round of editing, and neither of us were really having a good time with that one. So DNF on that one. And that concludes the DNFs. I think that's the most DNFs that I've had in 1 month in the entire year. So I'm not sure what was going on in June, but I apparently had no patience for mediocre books. Moving on to my nonfiction books of the month. I don't like to give ratings to nonfiction because I always feel bad giving it any less than 5 stars, but I actually had 3 nonfiction reads this month and they were all incredible. So the first one was Take Me to Your Leader by Degrasse Tyson, which is his take on what an alien invasion would look like and tips and tricks to survive it. It was also a beautiful love letter to sci-fi. I had never read anything by this author before, so I didn't really know what to expect in terms of his tone and writing style, but I had such a good time with it, which I'm not surprised by because hearing him speak, I could tell that he's definitely going to be a good writer, and I was not disappointed there. This was very well written, it was interesting, it was fun. I listened to the audiobook, which is also narrated by him, so it just felt like having a fun conversation about aliens with your pal. It was really fun, and I'm very glad that I was able to pick this one up. I read So Many Stars by Caro de Robertis, which is an oral history of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit people of color. I did a tandem read with this one with both the audiobook and the ebook. This one is told in interview styles. I'm actually not sure how many people were included in this book, but I would guess like at least a dozen, I want to say. And I found just doing the audiobook was a little bit confusing because it's just one narrator for everybody, so it was pretty challenging to keep track of who is who. But the ebook was really helpful in keeping track of who is who. But yeah, this was such a beautiful read. I really enjoyed this one, and I hope that everyone picks it up. It was well worth the read. It's a very challenging read in some parts, especially in the first half when they're all talking about their early lives. Most of the people in this book were born around the 1950s or so, and most of them came out as trans at a pretty young age. And this book did not shy away from the extreme hardships that most of them faced in regards to police brutality and social ridicule and just a whole bunch of heartbreaking things. But in the latter half of the book, it did focus on their joy and their lives now and how beautiful their lives are and how happy they are. So I thought it was a perfect balance of the realities of living in a trans body, especially as a person of color, and especially in the time that they were living in compared to now and how far things have come, but also discussing how much work there's still to do. My light just died and I have no idea what the charger is right now, so we're just gonna deal with kind of crappy lighting for the rest of the video. My bad. The curse continues of every single wrap up. Something goes wrong. Forget what I was saying. I know I was talking about So Many Stars, but I forget where I was, so I'm just gonna move on to the next one. The last nonfiction that I read in June was Before We Were Trans by Kit Taeum, which is also a nonfiction on trans history, but this one goes much farther back and takes a look at trans people throughout different cultures, pre and post colonization, and how things have changed over the course of the years as a result of colonization. This was also a phenomenal book. It was very informative. I learned a lot about historical figures that I'd never heard of before, and it gave me a lot of things that I want to research and learn more about. And yeah, definitely recommend this one as well. It was well worth the read, and the audiobook was very well done, so I do recommend going that route for it as well. Moving on to the rest of my reads, starting with the lowest rated. For the first time in recent memory, I actually have a book in the 1-star range, and I am sad about it. So I gave 1.5 stars to Dengue Boy. I don't even know how to explain what this book is about, but it was bad. There is a possibility that I just wasn't smart enough for this book. Maybe I just didn't get it, but god damn, this was a challenging read because it was just so stupid and completely nonsensical and disturbing in ways that it just didn't need to be. It was horror, but a lot of the horrific elements of it just felt like it was for shock value. Like it was just some fucked up dude bro who wanted to shock people and did so, but not for the right reasons. There was a lot of overly sexualizing of children in this book and like descriptions of children doing sexual things. It was disgusting and disturbing, and in terms of plot, it really made no sense. There was just so much crap going on in this very small book. It was extremely repetitive as well. It was so annoying to read, and I kind of wish that I had just DNF'd it. But honestly, it was like looking at a train wreck where I just couldn't look away from it for some reason, but I did not enjoy it whatsoever. So 1.5 stars for that one. I had no 2 or 2.5 star reads and only 1 3-star read, which was Drinks and Sinkholes. This was the Cozy Quill book club pick for the month. This was fun. I did like it. I thought it was very cozy. I liked the atmosphere. I wish the characters had a little bit more depth to them. And then in terms of logic, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. This book follows our main character who is an innkeeper, but all of a sudden a whole bunch of sinkholes and earthquakes start happening all over the village. And for whatever reason, the townspeople have tasked the innkeeper with figuring out what's going on and how to stop it. And when it takes her a while to do so, they're like getting mad at her for literal earthquakes as if she has any kind of control over that. And it was just kind of a weird concept in that way and didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was still a fun time and I enjoyed it, although I'm not going to carry on with the series. With my 3.5 stars, the first one was The Blue Road, which is a middle grade graphic novel about this girl who grew up in a swamp with no memory of her parents or anything, but she's forced to leave her home and ends up in this town where she is treated very poorly and is dealing with poverty and loneliness and a whole bunch of things. It's a magical metaphor for immigration and the hardships that immigrants have to face, but does have a hopeful message to it as well. This one was interesting. I thought it was mostly well done. I liked the message. I thought it was very nice. I had found the plot to be a little bit simple and would have liked a bit more out of it, but it was nice. I liked it, and the art style was also gorgeous. Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson, the third book in the Skyward series. This one is a YA sci-fi series, and while I liked it, I didn't like it as much as book 2, although the setting was cool as hell, and I wish that I could talk about it, but mentioning the setting of this book would completely spoil the ending of book 1, so I can't say anything about it, but it was so cool and right up my alley. It was exactly the kind of thing that I love in sci-fi, and the plot was pretty good as well. It kept me engaged. My main issue with the series is that the main character can be just a little bit irritating sometimes. She's very dramatic. I found her nearly insufferable in book 1. Book 2, she got better, and then book 3 is not as bad as book 1, but not quite as good as in book 2. But that's alright. I still had a good time with it overall, and I'm happy to have finally carried on with the series. I got a hold of the audiobook for A Long and Speaking Silence by Nieva, the newest installment in the Singing Hills cycle. I look forward to this release every single year. I love listening to these books over audio because it just feels like that's how they're meant to be consumed. I did like this one. It just wasn't nearly as good as the other books in the series, especially the last couple. The last few books have gone more in a horror direction, and I was really enjoying that. And this one was very cozy, very mundane. The main character in this one has lost their purse, so they go work at a restaurant until they can make enough money to be able to move on to the next place, and in the meantime, of course, are gathering stories. So I did like it. It was fun. I liked the characters. I liked the story. It just, like I said, wasn't as good as some of the other books in the series, but still a good time, so 3.5 stars for that one. Finally, the last of the 3.5 stars is My Best Friend's Honeymoon by Meryl Wilsner. I've read, I think, 4 of this author's books now, and I do really enjoy them. This one was good for the most part, but definitely not my favorite from them. I liked the first half of it a lot more than the second half. Oh, the synopsis for this one. So the main character at the start of the book is engaged. They've been engaged for a super long time, and one day her fiance surprises her by telling her that he's actually planned the entire wedding and didn't consult her at all, and it's happening in the next week, and she is so upset by this, understandably so, and also was already thinking that she maybe didn't want to be with him, that she ends up calling off the wedding. But he tells her that she should still take the honeymoon and take her best friend on their honeymoon because it's non-refundable and he doesn't want it to go to waste. So she takes her best friend and things go from there. The two of them have been in love pretty much their entire friendship, but were always too afraid to say anything about it. So I loved the setup for it. I loved the pining. However, once things actually started in terms of the romance, that's where it kind of lost me a bit, mainly in terms of the spicy scenes, because they either felt really juvenile or way too much, and there was no in between, and either end of the spectrum just felt a little bit cringe to me sometimes, and I was not enjoying that, but it was a large chunk of the book, so I couldn't really escape it. And then the lack of communication about their feelings was interesting at first, but eventually got really boring, and it made this fairly short book feel super long. So overall, pretty good time, just not incredible. My 4-star reads started with Wrangled by the Alien Rancher by Ursa, the second book in the Cowboy Colony Mail Order Bride series. I read the first book a couple months ago and really enjoyed it, and book 2 was also fantastic. I did like book 1 more, but this one was still really fun. It's a grumpy sunshine with the female character being the grumpy one and the male main character being this happy, goofy himbo who was adorable. I really liked their relationship. I thought it was really fun. It was a little bit too insta love for me because, like, in the first book they did fall in love pretty fast, but it was at least over the course of a couple of weeks, where from my understanding of book 2 it felt like it was literally overnight when they were just all of a sudden madly in love. So it was a bit quick in that way, but still a really good time, and I can't wait to carry on with the series at some point soon. I also gave 4 stars to Devon and Kris Plan a Wedding, which is a sapphic rom-com about these two women who join a dating show where they have to pretend to be engaged to a complete stranger, and if they manage to trick all their friends and family, then by the end of the game show they win, I think it's like $100,000 or something like that. This was such a good time. I really enjoyed it. I thought the two main characters were really interesting and well developed. I liked their communication, and their family dynamics were also very interesting. I think I was missing just a little bit of that, like, kicking my feet, giggling sort of feeling, but overall I had a really good time with this romance. I love watching competition dating shows, and I learned that I do also enjoy that in book form as well, so I'm glad that I picked this one up. I gave 4 stars to The Book Eaters by Sunya Dean, one of only 2 books off of my actual shelves that I read this month. My bad. This was a really unique concept. I thought it was so cool. In this book, the main character is a book eater, which is species that was created by this entity that disappeared but left them with a purpose to consume as much knowledge as possible, and they do so by eating books as their food, and they retain all of the information that they got from the book with the intention of one day passing on that knowledge to their creator, but they have been abandoned by their creator, and now they have no idea what their purpose in life is, so they're just kind of existing and trying to survive without being found out. However, there have been some book eaters being born where they do not eat books, they actually eat brains. They're called mind eaters, and the main character's son is one of these mind eaters. So she's been on the run for the last 5 years trying to keep her son safe. This was a whirlwind of a book. It did take me forever to read it. Not the book's fault though, I was just very busy and I just couldn't focus on it for longer than like maybe 20 pages per day, so it took me about 2 weeks to read it. But it was really interesting, it was engaging, and the plot was really action-packed and well done. It was sapphic as well, which I love, of course. The characters were very interesting and personable as well, so overall a really solid read. My one critique for it was that I wish there was more information about the book eaters and where they came from in their history. This is a standalone, but it left this huge question unanswered of, you know, who are they, where they come from, and where are they going, that I'll just never get an answer to. But aside from that, fantastic read. My last 4-star was Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I'm reading this book for 2 different vlogs actually. One is an episode of Page to Screen where I read the book and then watch the movie, and the other one is an author taste test. This was my first book by Jeff Vandermeer and I really enjoyed it. I loved his writing style. It was very pretty, very descriptive, kind of flowery. I could really get a sense of what this place looks like. The setting was by far the coolest part of this book. It was so weird and cosmic and surreal. Plot-wise, it was a little bit challenging to follow, but I do believe that was the point of the book. It's meant to be pretty confusing, just the nature of the story. It's very, very weird, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I know this was originally supposed to be a trilogy, and it's now, I think, 4 or 5 books are out at the time, so I'm curious to see what happens in the rest of the series. And finally, my last book for June was my only 5-star, and that was Starshipped by Kat Sebastian. This was so goddamn cute. This is a contemporary queer rom-com about 2 people who are actors on a sort of Star Trek type show, and they have not been very friendly for many years. I think they're on their like 7th season of the show, and they kind of hate each other, but they decided to try and at least appear as friends just for PR reasons. So they go on a little road trip together and things go from there. This was so good. I had such a fun time with this one. I loved their banter so much. They were hilarious together. Both of them are terrible at communicating and terrible at being vulnerable, and any time where they had to be vulnerable with each other, they were like pissed off about it and telling each other to fuck off and shut up because they had to be vulnerable, and it was so goddamn cute. They're just constantly roasting each other in the most loving way possible. It was so sweet. I can honestly rant about how happy this book made me forever, but I'm going to leave that there. I'm so glad that I picked up this book. I squeezed it in at the very last minute in June. It was supposed to actually be on my July TBR, but I couldn't resist, so I picked it up in June, and I'm very happy that I did so. This was phenomenal, and I can't wait to read more books from Kat Sebastian. This was, I think, my 5th book from them, and also solidified them as being a new favorite author as well. But there we have it. Those are all the books that I read. But before we go, let's get into the superlatives, starting with the best book of the month, which was of course Starshipped, and worst book easily with Dengue Boy. My biggest surprise I'm going to give to Annihilation, because I really didn't know what to expect, and I definitely didn't expect the author's writing to be as beautiful as it was. Biggest disappointment I would say was Drinks and Sinkholes, because I hoped to like that one a bit more than I did. Even though it wasn't a bad book, it still wasn't quite as good as I wanted it to be. Most memorable I'm going to give to The Book Eaters because of how unique a concept it is. Most forgettable is probably my best friend's Honeymoon. Even though I enjoyed it, I have read very similar books in the past, so it's not one that I'm going to think about for a very long time. Best audiobook has to go to A Long and Speaking Silence. I love these audiobooks so much. And finally, the prettiest cover goes to Before We Were Trans, which is just such a beautiful, beautiful cover. There are actually 2 covers for this one. Both of them are equally gorgeous, but this one is my favorite. So yeah, that'll do it for this month's wrap up. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And also let me know what the best and worst book that you read last month. I would love to hear it. But in the meantime, thank you as always for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video.